It's good to have just a hop, skip, and a jump to drive to a town hall meeting as opposed to Boston across the state and things. So we'd love to have you here, and I'm glad to be here as well. This is home turf. I'm almost a Franklin Township resident. Halfway across the road in front of my house goes from England Township to Franklin Township. So I can look out my front window and see Franklin Township. Of course, I have friends all around there. So this is home. It's good to be here. I want to start a bit early here. I guess I'm not now. The way it often works in Washington now is we have hearings. It seemed like very few hearings while we're in Washington, and markups as well. Markups meaning marking up the bill for final vote on a committee. And today we just got notice this week that had a virtual hearing taking place this morning, and it started at 11 o'clock for the hearing, and it's in the Communications and Technology Subcommittee. It's a fairly important subcommittee when you think of all that's going on the net and all of the social issues that are out there. We're trying to control and seeing what Zuckerberg does. Now what finding is going on with an attempt to have an actual agency of government to weed out disinformation. I'm glad that ultimately we gave them so much heat on that the one lady they put in charge of it, who was a proponent of disinformation herself, was actually run out, I guess you'd say, or she chose to resign, and now that agency is without a leader or without a rudder as well. But this morning, it's interesting, the hearing that we're going to have, that I'm going to have to head out to the car quickly and get myself on the virtual, because questioning in the committee comes by the time that you're in the room, i.e. today, the time that you're on screen. And so I want to make sure that I don't lose any spots in the questioning process, so I want to be out there for it. The questioning will center around today a number of bills, and if you can imagine doing virtual hearing on, this looks like here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bills. Ensuring Phone and Internet Access for SNAP Recipients Act, a Democrat bill. Then the next bill, Institute for Telecommunications Science Codification Act. That's a Republican bill. Next bill, the Simplifying Management, Reallocation, and Transfer of Spectrum Act, or called the SMART Act. Another Republican bill trying to deal with all of the spectrum out there, making sure that law enforcement has spectrum, that communications have telephone, radio have spectrum, as well as the internet has spectrum. Not a simple bill. And you stop and think about that, to do that in a committee room, live, with the opportunity to interact back and forth as opposed to online where that opportunity isn't there. It's a real concern. Next bill is Safe Connections Act of 2022. That's a Democrat bill. And then the final bill is Extending America's Spectrum Auction Leadership Act of 2022, which is a bipartisan bill. All significant bills related to telecommunications that are going on. but that's going to be done initially on my cell phone in the car that's driving me back to my house, then to transfer to my laptop and spend the rest of the day, however long it goes, listening to testimony and then questioning the witnesses that are in front of us. Just is not the way things should be done. This could have been done last week while we were in session. I had numerous hours that I didn't have a committee hearing or subcommittee hearing last week each day. We had 2 hearings last week, all on the same day, 2 markups. So I was running back and forth down the hallway from Education and Labor Committee to Energy and Commerce Committee. And that's fine. Lost a little weight that day. I put it on later that night again. But the rest of the week, I had no hearings. And yet this week, when we're supposed to be back doing things like this, meeting our constituents, hearing from them, communicating back, and now we have these virtual hearings. So we'll have to leave a couple minutes early just to get online. So I'm not going to take too much time for opening. You see here, this, if you've been at, I see faces out who have been over the course of the past year at a number of town halls, and this has been up there. It hasn't changed. The prices still continue in all of those areas. When you stop and think about what could have been accomplished by just simply doing nothing, letting the good economy that had developed in the last administration, even to a great extent during the COVID initial crisis that went on. Stop and think about gas prices just before COVID hit. On average, $1.79 a gallon. We got the COVID, we saw it expand, go up a bit, it became an average just before January 20th of 2021, when the administrations changed. It was at $2.39 a gallon. And now, as of yesterday, the national average was at $4.57 a gallon. And they're talking about climbing to $6 a gallon before the end of the summer. And in fact, now we're hearing some reports saying it may go beyond that. I was at a gas station topping off my tank of my pickup truck, and 35-gallon tank on that thing. I don't let it get below a quarter tank now. It's too painful. But I could pay for that, yes. I saw a lady, I hate to say elderly because I'm profiling. Bob, when I look at you, I don't profile young man. She was an elderly lady. I would guess at the very least in her 80s. And she had a small, compact car, not brand new, but well kept. And I looked at her as she was filling her tank or topping it off or whatever, looking back, constantly looking back for that number when she was going to let the trigger off. And I could only conclude that she was filling enough to get through the needs that she had for the near future. And sure, she probably wasn't going to work every day and having to spend money to do that. She was probably going grocery shopping maybe once a week, maybe once every other week. She may be going to church each Sunday. But she's on a fixed income, undoubtedly. Social Security isn't keeping up with inflation. I know that. I'm on that. I'm on Medicare. I understand that. That's where the challenge comes in. And that's when you look at a crisis and it becomes personal to people, and shouldn't be that way. And last week, the president extended the prohibition on any additional drilling and permitting in the Gulf and in Alaska. Why? Does that make sense? With inflation banging away every day and talks of recession, and it's not talks anymore, there's an expectation that's going to happen. With supply chain issues, with foodstuffs in the store, a problem with a war going on over in Ukraine that's going to impact all of us, because somebody's going to have to feed those people that aren't going to get the grains from Ukraine. The breadbasket of Europe
And so it'll be America, and our farmers will do their absolute best. If they can't get fertilizer now, or if they get it, it's double. And I'm not spinning that. It's double at least of what they paid, if they can get it. And so the challenge is real. And to think that we have these crises going on. Thankfully, a judge overruled the suspension of Title 42, but they're still going to come across the board in rapid fashion. Anyway, that's the news. Now the questions will go to you. If you have questions or concerns, yes.
Thank you for coming. Given if we win the House in November, which I'm sure we will, and maybe the Senate, would you vote to impeach Joe Biden?
Based upon what we see, if we have the votes to do that, our effort is going to be to stop Joe Biden from doing any further damage as much as possible. The impeachment question comes with a number of things. Are there the votes in the House to do it? Are there the votes in the Senate to convict? Undoubtedly, there probably won't be the votes in the Senate to convict. So that's a big concern. But there's another.
It requires 60 votes.
It would require 60 votes. But the big thing, do you want Kamala Harris?
Well, no, then we impeach her too. See, that's
I think we have to think strategically. First of all, we have to determine that he has done something that is impeachable and not just incompetent. We have to determine if we have the votes. And we have to determine whether it's wise to do it and put somebody else that may be more dangerous in place. And if you impeach, as you go following your line, if we impeach Kamala, then we get Nancy. As a Republican, and I'm speaking here in a bipartisan setting. This is not a political campaign setting, though it's hard not to point out all of the stuff that's going wrong. And I think that's fact, that's not a campaign. And I think we will take the majority in the House. How much remains to be seen. We took back 15 seats last time, so there aren't as many seats to gain this time. But I believe we will if we keep to the course, make sure the ballot is protected, and the ballot box is secure. We do all of that, I think we will. But I think Joe Biden is making the case for us of why we need a change in the presidency in 2024. And that may be better than going an impeachment route. I personally think it is. Because we can show next term, when the Republicans in the House at the very least, put through pieces of legislation, do oversight investigations, actual oversight investigations. If the Democrats have run the January 6th investigation, we want to do the January 5th investigation. Why was the Capitol so unprepared? We want to look at Hunter's laptop and how that was connected to a vice president. We want to look at the Durham Report. And we want to see the Russia that's been proved to be a hoax that went on and took people's eyes off the ball. Those are the types of things that we want to spend our time on. And to run an impeachment, I think the Democrats would love us to do that, because then that takes the eyes off the ball of what has happened, producing this, and what we could do in changing if we get the Senate and a stronger majority, which in 2024, the Democrats have more seats up in the Senate than the Republicans, which makes a greater problem for them to keep the majority of the game back. If we take it, I think we'll take the majority back this time, but only by 1 or 2 votes. So the next question.
Very leader, thank you. Set this up for my question. President Joe Biden, 79 years old, 45 years in public service, presidential information available, nothing in the private sector, paid 2 years. Vice President KAMMYLOU HARRIS, I neighborize her, KAMMYLOU, 57 years old, 32 years in public service, no indication of any private sector experience or accomplishments. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, 82 years old, over 45 years in public service, no indication of any private service, employment experience, or accomplishments. President Pro Tem of the Senate, Patrick Leahy, 82 years old, 45 years in the Senate, over 47 years in public service, essentially zero in the private sector. The top three constitutional successors' average age is 74 years old, with the average totaling over 122 years of public service with less than 1% in the private sector. The average life expectancy, this is the uncomfortable point that I make, of males and females in the United States is 78 years old. And when you look at the average age of the top four people who are the successor list in our nation, it's kind of frightening, all right? So, this brings me to, how many of them do you feel have ever had to make a payroll in the private sector or even fill their own gas tank in today's economy? What are your positions on term limits and age limits in federal service, Mr. Walberg? Thank you.
I don't know whether they've had to fill their own gas tanks at some point in time. I would assume they have. But I think in recent days, many of them haven't. I don't think Nancy Pelosi has. She's carted around and with her police with her at all times, guarding her at all times, driving her every place. All the leadership team gets that. What more importantly, I think they've all lost perspective on what America is, what our foundational principles are. And you can just hear Nancy Pelosi's comments about abortion as a Catholic. Last week and even beyond that, lost all concept of what the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, the Constitution provides for life, for liberty in this country. On term limits, I've stated this clearly numerous times. I'm opposed to term limits. Why? Because I believe that the wisdom of the framers and founders has been proven time and time again. But the only way this democracy, which is not a pure democracy, it's a constitutional democracy, it's a republic. The only way it continues is by people engaging in their government. And that means taking interest. Doing what you're doing today. This place shouldn't have enough room for all the people. And wish we could find some more seats for those that are standing here. There's a few around, if you care to take them. So term limits are artificial. Stop and think about it. We've had term limits in the state of Michigan now. Since I was in office when term limits were put in. I believe it was 1996 when the state went to term limits. You've seen them. Have you seen any improvement from your perspective in the state legislature? You've seen speakers of the House that have had 2 years of service before they become a speaker. You've seen them lining up for other jobs in the Senate, etc., before they've even had time to mature and find anything beyond the bathroom cabinet. So I think you look at that and say what the framers and founders wanted was people to come to meetings like this, to hold me accountable, to listen to what I say, to watch how I vote, and then determine whether I should continue. You know, we use John Dingell, for instance, 59 years in Congress, his father before him. But remember, he was elected by constituency, multiple constituency all those years. So was it his fault in being a member of Congress? Or was it the fault and the responsibility of the electorate that elected him? I served this district for 2 years, and then they threw me out, if you remember that. I was term limited, the way the framers and founders expected it to happen. I didn't like it. I didn't think it was right, but I was sent home for 2 years in 2008 in the Obama landslide. I was encouraged to run again in 2010. I'm glad I did, and I've held the seat since then. I think I've held the seat because I've kept my promises. I've shown that I'm a true conservative. I have a voting record that's quantified to show that. And I've also showed that I'm effective in getting things done. Not by just me saying it, by entities that look at this and say, Walberg is the most effective member of the Michigan delegation, even though, because that came from Vanderbilt University and the University of Virginia's Center for Legislative Effectiveness that just looks at effectiveness. They don't look at types of bill that introduce or get through the line. And I'm still the lifetime rating by the American Conservative Union, the most conservative member of the Michigan delegation, with 90+ rating for 13 years, consistency. So that's why I say term limits are artificial. We haven't seen any indication that term limits in this state or other states have changed what goes on. The people have to decide that. And that's why we hold more town hall meetings than all but 9 other members of 535 members of Congress, House and Senate, to do these type of things. The other part was age limit. No, I'd throw some of the old guys out right now, but I'd throw some of the young ones out too, who aren't dry behind the ears yet. That's an old expression. Is that politically incorrect for me to say that? Doctor, can I say that? I think it's a fact. I'm pretty dry here right now.
In this room, you could say it.
Yeah. But there's some sharp young people too. Now that goes back to what the electorate is willing to look at and expect from their elected individuals. I don't think there's I think there's a point in time where someone is showing signs of dementia or age-related loss of abilities that the electorate ought to see and kindly say thank you for your service, but it's time to move on. There ought to be counselors telling that. But the artificial stuff makes it too easy for us to say, well, we'll put up with it till age what? Or we'll put up with it for the next 4 years because then that person is term limited and we get somebody new. Framers and founders said, no, you ought to be looking at them all the time. There's wonderful stories about Daniel Boone, of all people, being called back to his districts and put on the carpet. Well, literally, it wasn't on a carpet, it was on a hay wagon, a hay rack, in front of a bunch of farmers, and he had to explain to them why he had voted the way he voted and then apologize and say he'd never do it again. Those are the type of things that I think about here. I hope that answers you. Other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask about what's going on currently in the meeting in Switzerland pertaining to the W.H.O. pandemic treaty.
In Davos?
Yes, the emergency health power over the United States, an amendment that Biden is trying to pass through. And it would be a whole society approach to pandemics, which would be operational control over public health measures by Mr. Tedros.
If you go to my official website, you can read more about that. It was originally Trump's administration language, and it was to combat the Wuhan lie that was going on. It did not give and does not give total control to who. The country itself, each of the countries that would come under this, still have the opportunity to not accept it. So it isn't. My concern is, while it was pushed by the Trump administration, and while it doesn't give absolute authority from WHO or a globalist enclave over the United States of America, that's all dependent upon who's in office at the time. And so I personally would rather see us out of the World Health Organization, just like the United Nations, and deal with all of this issue on ourselves. We have the ability to have scientists, medical professionals who can speak to the issue of a virus like COVID-19 as well as or better than anybody else in the world, including the World Health Organization. So that's what's going on. It's not as dire necessarily as some are reporting it to be.
It's not. So as far as, I thought when Trump was in office, he pulled out of the WHO on our behalf. And then now there's an amendment that Biden's trying to get passed through that would give the accept those. He is
No, it's
not-
the same amendment. And like I said, if you go to my website, you can read the actual testimony by the Trump official in Health and Human Services to the committee on this particular provision, which was an effort to go above and beyond the blockage that China was giving about what went on in Wuhan.
Right.
And frankly, what Fauci and others were trying to block. And make sure that information could be put out for the world to see. And efforts take to battle back on that. He did that, all the while still saying we should get out of WHO. So if you go to the website, you can read more about it. My concern is that while it could be useful if Trump were in office to pull out the information necessary and still say to the global community, we are a sovereign nation, you will not ultimately tell us what we can and can't do.
So you're saying we don't have to worry
We don't
about,
have,
about them having sovereignty?
no, I'm saying what we have to worry about is that while this doesn't mandate or give WHO the ability to control what the United States does, we can accept it. And that's where it concerns me with an administration we have in right now, that they would accept the control.
And that's what I wanted to ask you then. What can we do? Like you say, we have to do our part as far as voting and such, and we do. And so when things such as your list come up, which there's a lot of debacles going on, we do our part, but nothing seems to change. So if they have pandemic control over us, that's what I'm asking you. What should we do? Should we call the Capitol number and say, for instance, my name is Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts is calling. I want to speak to my senator. I do not want this to go through. I do not want the WHO to have pandemic control, because if they get that control through emergency powers over us, we can't address anything that's on your list and get it corrected.
You can do two things. You can make those calls, and I encourage you to be a vocal majority out there. The other side has been a vocal minority, but they've appeared to be the majority with the help of the media and others. They're not the majority. The vocal majority needs to stand up and say, wait a second, Republican or Democrat, it makes no difference. We are still a sovereign country. We do not want any control from an outside source.
Who makes that call that can be accepted?
Ultimately, it'll be the president.
That's what worries
And
me,
his
because
administration.
we have them.
And that's why I say, while it was Trump's idea, and you can read the language and the testimony from the Trump administration back before the election, it was an effort to control WHO and control China. But with this administration and now, all bets are off. So that's why I say, while it wasn't a bad idea to get at Wuhan at that point in time, now it could be a bad idea.
Congress still has to
because
approve the treaty though, right?
Pardon?
Congress still approves the treaty.
Well, who's in control of Congress right now?
No, Biden put it in.
I understand,
Who's in
but
control of Congress? And so that's why it comes down to, this administration has a say right now.
Yeah.
I'll never get a vote on it. No matter how loud I scream, and we've screamed about a lot. We've tried to get votes up, even as recently last week, on various things. We put what's called a motion to recommit, which is the last amendment. At the very least, to get Democrats on record opposing stuff that you like, and that you would support. And they beat it down every time. So the reality is that particular language wouldn't pose a problem for us if we have an administration and a Congress leadership that believes in the foundational principles of America. But since there's a concern about that right now, I think there's a real concern about that language.
Right.
And like I said, you can read on my website, walberg.house.gov. Right, Dan? It's there. And you can read also the actual transcript of the testimony given back in 2020 by the Trump administration.
But with all due respect, we're beyond that point, and I don't want emergency powers.
But I think that's what I'm saying to you.
So what should I do? Just tell me what,
That's why I told you, make those calls.
okay.
But the second thing is, vote. Vote.
But this is gonna be decided on May 28th.
That's life.
Well, for the WHO treaty, call your senator, raise a stink with them, get your friends to call. your
That's life.
The
The vote,
decision's gonna be
The
made
the
on
vote,
May
the vote
28th.
has
That's
taken
who's gonna
place.
vote for the treaty is the Senate. We
Right,
have to raise a stink with them, but we also have to realize that They can't vote away our freedoms, okay?
Okay, let me go on here. Let me go on. Hang on a second. Hang on a second.
Vote away our freedoms.
Hang on a second. You can ask a question, but let's keep it in order. All of a sudden it becomes a free-for-all. You ask me what you need to do. Yeah, make those calls. Don't hesitate. That's your responsibility as well as your right and your authority. You are the government. I'm a representative in the government.
Right, which I have. You can call the Capitol and just say, I'm Vicki Roberts, I want to be
Do that.
connected to my senator in
And
Michigan.
then the next voting opportunity, which comes in August for the primary, vote. Get your friends and neighbors who will think rationally to vote. You know, I've made jokes, and this is clearly a joke, because I know I'm on screen here. This is clearly a joke, and oftentimes things are edited when I'm on screen later on. But at the very least, if you're concerned about a person's vote, tell them Democrats vote on Wednesdays. It's a joke. It's a joke. We need to remember and learn from what took place in 2020 elections. But we're down the road now. Today there are 4 primary elections taking place in states, including Georgia, around the country. Our election will come in August 2nd. It's important to get someone in who has a proven record, who knows what he's doing, is a true conservative, and will fight against stuff like this. And then ultimately November, to vote again. Those are the only 2 things we can do. If you're looking for a miracle, there aren't miracles. It's just hard work. I've done this work for many years now, through thick or thin. Sometimes I've won, sometimes I've lost. Right now I'm living under a lost situation. Don't like it, but it is what it is. So we have the opportunity to change if we don't just throw our hands up and say, it's all over with. My vote doesn't count. Why bother? That's what they'd love you to think. That's what they would love you to think. And there are all sorts of efforts now to make sure that the ballot box is sacred, is protected this next time around. But there's always been fraud. I grew up in Chicago, I don't know. I'm probably still voting there. Having lived here in the same house for 43 years, just across the line from Franklin Township, I'm probably still voting. It may be a joke for those watching on the screen, but probably not. On the south side of Chicago, you know, my family was a minority, being Republicans. My dad was a union member as well, but conservative Republican. But you got to vote. Talk, speak out, educate your friends and neighbors. The best way to do it, though, is with a smile on your face. Honey draws a little bit more than vinegar. And besides that, if you're a true American patriot conservative, you still got to be happy you're living in the freest country in the world still. That has its challenges and people battling to change them. But man, we ought to be optimistic, positive people. Now the rest, there ought to be concern, because you want to go away from the principles that made this country great. Question? Anyone? Yes, sir.
Energy crisis. You mentioned opportunities to drill and turn up our own oil production. And from what I've read, that can be, over the course of a couple of years, 3 to 4 million additional barrels, if you include the Gulf or the offshore areas in Alaska. But the Keystone Pipeline, if it opened up, would pour more than that of Canadian crude through that pipeline down to refineries in the southern part of the United States. Is there any inertia, any interest, any talk from anybody that pipeline could possibly go through? Because we've lost 10 million barrels of oil per day from Russian oil reserves that are supposedly banned. I don't know if that, I'm sure they're selling some in spot markets or illegally, but if you can make up between the US and Canada over the course of a couple or 3 years, 7 or 8 million of that, it has to take a big bite out of the energy problem.
If we got back to North American energy independence, yeah, we wouldn't need any other natural gas or oil from any other place in the world. And we were there on January 20th or 19th, January 19th, we were still energy independent, North American energy. That included Canadian crude that was coming across. You're absolutely right. We've talked with, we being members of the Education, or excuse me, the Energy and Commerce Committee, Energy Subcommittee. One of my colleagues actually talked with the company that was putting in the Keystone Pipeline and asked if they would be willing to start it up again. And the chairman of that company said, no, we're not going through it again. We lost so much money by being shut down time and time again, lawsuits and all the rest. We're going to have to get somebody else to do it. Can it be done? Yeah, absolutely. With the right administration in, as Trump was, said, let's do it. They fought him hard, they had lawsuits, but finally he got the movement forward. And then Biden comes in office and shut down. The very first thing he did after he took his oath of office, went into the president's room in the off the Senate chambers and signed the elimination of the Keystone Pipeline. And no, we could do that, but it's an all of the above. You know, I don't want to scare you, but I'll tell you honestly, I am a member of a new caucus in Congress. It's the Conservative Climate Caucus. Climate. We believe we need a place at the table as conservatives. What went on in Glasgow was a total fear-for-all that ended in what's taking place with Russia right now. Three of us from the Conservative Climate Caucus went over to Brussels a couple months ago. And we met with the European Union parliamentarians and the Commission, Energy Commissioner. We also met with individuals related to energy and climate in the Netherlands and Rotterdam, and then up in Sweden. Saw some neat things. Saw a electric furnace, steel furnace. And I worked in an electric furnace at U.S. Steel Southworks while I was in college. And I know the power it takes to light those electrodes up to start a heat in producing steel. It doesn't come from windmill, I promise you. It doesn't come from solar panel. It at that time came from big coal. But I saw a hydrogen-powered electric furnace way up north in Sweden that was really neat. Green as could be. Basically was made from water. Now there are things we can do, and we can do better. But an all-of-the-above energy plan is what makes us secure. And as we met with those parliamentarians, the three of us came away from those meetings believing more in the plan that we were in. Wind, solar, fine. Hydro, great. But natural gas is what made our air clean. And natural gas is what will make India, its air clean, and China's air clean. And until we make those countries air clean, we're not going to change the carbon content one iota in our country. We've done it and done it well. And so as we met with those parliamentarians and explained that to them and asked them the question about base energy, where do you get your base energy from? Well, they'd say, well, we've taken care of that. We purchase it. Of course, the next question we asked them, because we knew the answer, who have you purchased it from? Russia. The week we were there, at the end of the week, the war started in Ukraine. Their thoughts were different at that time than they were earlier in the week. Even the Green Party guy, because now they were caught. And so all of the above is what we have to do. We've got resources. We still have natural, we don't know how much natural gas we have. We've got it for years and years and years and years, very least. And it works. It's cleaned up our air, our environment. I contend we can still use clean coal technology. We've got lots of coal. We're shipping it to China. How's that working out for us? Next question. Yes, sir.
Well, we all know that the energy crisis and economic crisis are closely tied. especially with our dependence on travel, recreation, and the tourist trade that Michigan is so fond of being dependent on. Is there any way that Biden's decision to curtail the fueling and things that he's seems to be against, is there a recourse that can be overturned, that decision?
Yes, if Congress would do it. We can overturn executive orders, but again, it comes down to numbers, majority. We put up legislation last week as an amendment that would require the administration to establish a plan for energy for the next 5 years and lay that out publicly. Two things would have come from that. Either the administration would have jumped quickly to put something in place that made an appearance, at the very least, that they have an energy plan that uses North American energy and makes us independent, or it would have shown to the entire American public that they don't have an idea that works. We've offered other amendments that would have put actual permitting processes in place to give the permits. They talked about 9,000 leases. You can have 9,000 leases that aren't used right now, but until you know the fact that there are a lot of leases put on land that the exploration companies are not certain that they'll ever show anything there, but they're going to get the lease so they can begin to do the development. If they find something great, if they don't, a lot of dollars put into it. So just because there are leases out there doesn't mean that they will then be going for permits, which takes about 6 different permits in the process to get that, to finally put a drilling rig on the property to get it out. So Trump was successful in basically saying we're going to take all inhibitors off, we're going to reduce the time for permitting, not reduce the safety and security of the necessary permits to make sure that we're doing things right, but we're going to do it quicker, and we're going to get things going. And just by saying that, it encouraged investment into the field, and that's what we're losing right now. What person in their right mind, knowing the policy of this administration on fossil fuels, is going to see that as a good investment to get into? And so who are the investors now in our energy? It's you and me at the pump.
There's not enough Democrats across the aisle that would come together and say, we need to fix this.
We haven't found it yet. We know there should be some, especially the Texans,
Exactly.
especially the
There's gotta be
Oklahomans. And we hear them griping behind closed doors. I hear them and talking with some of them on energy subcommittee. But to put their vote out on the line, we haven't found it yet. And that's what's scary. That's what's scary. People complain about Republicans not sometimes standing together. Well, we're a little more independent on that. And sometimes we actually say for our constituents, we're going to represent the constituents and not just the party. But that sometimes makes it difficult for a Republican Speaker of the House to get those 218 votes that are necessary to get it across the line. And I hope when we take majority to this next term, and I hope that's true, that we will solidify and at least do some things to fix this in a unified fashion right away. But we also know in the end, it's got to make it through the Senate, which will be at a close margin again. And if it gets through there, then you've got Biden or Kamala in the White House. And what does that mean? So we have to also adjust our expectations. But like I said, if we have that opportunity to put stuff out of the House that you can see what would take place if we had a president in the White House who was saying, bring it to me, like Trump. Bring it to me, get it to me. And we found ways to bypass the Senate, for instance, for the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, by doing reconciliation so it didn't have to go to the Senate and have a 60-vote requirement. We didn't get as much as we wanted in that tax cut, but we got most of it, and the president was able to sign it. The same with on other things. We almost got the Obamacare repeal, except for one guy, John McCain. So sometimes you have those problems too. Bob?
I know this is a bipartisan question. I know you are our congressman from the 7th district, which includes 7 counties. Now with redistricting, which I don't approve of, you're now going to be the 5th district. So could you tell me which counties got deleted and which counties got added to the new 5th district?
Yeah, constitutionally, every 10 years, there's redistricting to make sure that as close to possible, we have one person, one vote concept. So you take some population away from a district, give it to another one. It's all messed up. Finally, you come out with the redistricting plan. All states do that. We chose, the voters were sold on, I think, a bill of goods, taking that from the legislature's responsibility, who are your representatives. They were your representatives to do the redistricting. And now we have a commission that are unelected. And we don't know for sure whether they're Republican or Democrat, even though it's supposed to be equal number of Republicans and Democrats and an additional couple on the independent side, whatever that meant. Looking at all of the resumes of the people that are on there now, I think you could safely include there were probably only 2 real Republicans on that commission who redistricted the state. I gotta be honest with you, that's not the way to do it, because you have no say in that. And that's what George Soros and others, they will put these nice sounding things up. Like Planned Parenthood is trying to get a petition circulated and a referendum on the ballot that will make abortion beyond Roe v. Wade. No restrictions on it in the state of Michigan. And do away with our 1931 law that was put in place by the legislature. Anyway, my new district will consist of Monroe, Lenawee, Hillsdale, Branch, St. Joe, Cass, and most of Berrien County. 4 townships in Kalamazoo County on the southern, southeastern part of Kalamazoo. I'll have all of Calhoun County except Battle Creek and Penfield Township. And I represented them for my first 2 terms in Congress, Calhoun County. And then I keep Jackson County. I lose Eaton County, which went north of Lansing and had the bedroom communities for Michigan State and state government in it. It's a real conservative area. And I lose Washtenaw County. I had almost all of Washtenaw County except Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti. And I lose that. So my district, which was established as an R+1 district, that means Republican +1 point based upon presidential polling and our last elections when I first got it. So it's a swing seat. Now I get an R15 district. I'm not sure how I will live with a solid Republican district. So people say to me then, Tim, why are you complaining about the Redistricting Commission? Well, if you look at the rest of the state, you look at what they did in the state legislature. Lenawee County is split into 3 House districts, right? Doesn't 3? You got 3 House districts. One of our districts goes from Tecumseh to Ann Arbor. You think that'll represent Lenawee County well? When you've had the blessing of having one state legislator basically for this entire county except for Cambridge Township. You've had Bronicali as your legislator, Nancy Jenkins before. I represented this district, had the entire county when I was in the state legislature. So that's what went on. But yeah, I will go from the Canadian border in Lake Erie to the Illinois border in Lake Michigan. And it's safer in the Canadian border than it is Illinois border. I can joke about that because I'm from Illinois, but at least I was raised there. Another question back here?
I got one.
Okay.
I work at Ford Motor Company, and we've got thousands of vehicles in southeastern Michigan just sitting there with no chips. We got the baby food deal coming from a plant in Michigan closed down. My wife needs a special medication, the plant is closed down, we happen to be in India. It's just so frustrating. We never learn to keep our eggs just in one basket. Is there any movement saying, hey guys, we need to get our heads straight and say we need more than one supply for certain things? It's so frustrating.
That was a silver lining of COVID, the initial phases of COVID when Trump was still in office, because he had been pushing the America First plan and giving incentives. Our tax policy that we passed gave incentives for corporations to come back home and not suffer the tax policy that had been there for years. And so we began to see that happen. But then COVID showed us that we still had too much in China and other places, especially in our pharmaceuticals. And so had we continued that policy in place, I think you'd have seen more of the supply chain problem handled, because we'd had the chips and the ability to get those. We would have been mining for the rare earth minerals and things that go into those chips. And we have those in our country. There are some that we still need to get predominantly from some other countries. But it comes from a relationship that says, we expect you to protect your own, but we're going to protect our own first. So we'll come to a meeting place and do that. Then it comes to expecting the bureaucracy to do their work. There are federal employees still not back in the office, not just the IRS, but there are federal employees who have not come back when the rest of the country has rebounded to that. And so you have regulators from the Food and Drug Administration, for instance, that aren't regulating, and that's why we have the Sturgis deal, which will be in my new district. Sure, it had some significant violations on hygiene. Don't know why Abbott Labs would have allowed that, but they were there. But the 4 kids that were impacted, 2 sadly died. The organisms that were found in them were not the same organisms found in the plant. So the FDA should have been there saying, you will use a lot of chlorine to clean this out. You will put policies in place to make sure it never happens again. And we're going to get you up and running because we need you. That didn't happen until beginning last week. And so now if it gets up and running by June 1st, they say the first jars that will come out are baby food formula. And this is not simple baby food. This is for more complex cases and even adults that need some of this supplement because of the health conditions, physical conditions. Won't happen until probably the middle of July. So these are examples. Your wife is dealing with that as a problem, and we hope we find the solutions quicker than longer. But it is just simply taking the eye off the ball. And some of the things that went on, even with the supply chain out in the East Coast, Long Beach, was pure union problems. And the unwillingness of the administration to say, hey, I support unions. You know that. I'm Union Joe. But we have a need right now. And so we're going to make an executive order supersede. We're going to do an Operation Warp Speed or whatever you wanted to do to get the things shipped. Say truckers can go in. They don't just have to be a union trucker. Or we don't have cargo containers that have to be unfilled first before we let another one come out. All of that could have been taken care of. And it's sad to see here we are with the situation we have right now.
The company I'm working with, we're working on relocating production from Sri Lanka to right here in this area. So we're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying, but do you think we're screwed up?
Well, now is the time also. Now is the time also for us as we think about what you're doing. Even still using some foreign supplement to what we need. But making the treaties and agreements right now, when you think of the European Union and what's going on with Ukraine and the challenge of Russia, this is a time we ought to cut the deal with them that is in our favor about getting necessary things from them for us, but also some better trade deals for us to them with our products.
So we're messed up, but the rest of the world is really messed up.
Yeah. Yes,
Go along with this China situation, I've heard that they are buying up thousands and thousands of acres in Oklahoma for mega farms, and that eventually they will be growing marijuana on these acres. That, I don't know about the marijuana, but they are buying up. This isn't just under the Biden administration, they've been buying land from around Toledo and everything for years. Why are we selling land to China when you can't go over there and buy an acre of land?
yeah, that's, we shouldn't be. We're not only buying farmland, we're letting them develop ports. And I've seen some of those ports, both in this country, but also overseas, right next to our military installations. And you don't think that port is there for a bigger purpose than just
Right.
transportation of goods? It's there for listening in.
Why is America letting them do it?
We've got to change
The government
that.
should say, you know, you aren't allowed to purchase American soil.
Yeah.
Or you will let us purchase Chinese soil.
Well, I think it's come to a point in time where we have to say no until China responds to the issues of our concern, which includes human trafficking, forced labor, genocide, think of the Uyghurs. Until you respond that way, we're not going to allow. In fact, we put forward resolutions, some of those motions to recommit, that the Democrats have shut down to do those very things. So they're ready to go. We just have to have the majority to do it. And I've long been a person who believes in free enterprise and free market, but a fair market and fair trade as well. But there are some countries we have to show aggressive action in such a way until they change, or we don't do anything with them. China is one of those.
Equal is only fair. And since we aren't allowed to do any of that, and all they're doing is they're making money off of us right and left, then we turn around and buy our land.
Yeah.
So we're paying for it to give it to China.
I agree. I think I can take one more question before I got to go and hook up with the virtual thing.
You touched on Title 42 going away briefly. I've read by some estimates, if it's abandoned, that by the end of the Biden administration, 20% of people living in the United States will be illegal. Not to mention the fentanyl and the human trafficking and all the social welfare costs of all these influx of migrants. Is there anything we can do to stop this? We don't have the resources to pay for a lot of what we need now. We can't afford this influx of migrants.
Well, I can say the simple answer is go back to what we were doing prior to 20th of January 2021. It was working.
I know.
It was working. We had magistrates that were keeping the quota down, and they were hearing cases of legitimate immigration requests. We had stay in Mexico plan that was working, and we didn't have. You heard nothing about an overrun of the border. It wasn't happening. I was down there. I saw it.
The only Democrat who speaks out is Henry Cuellar.
Yeah.
I mean, there have to be others.
And he may lose his re-elect today.
And there got to be others grousing behind closed doors, like you were saying earlier.
We know what to do. If we just go back to those policies. That's why I said if Joe Biden, when he took office, would have said, I'm going to do nothing for the first year, he might be cruising to re-election. Because things were working. And COVID was prepared for him. He already had a vaccine. Now, he didn't remember that. And he's had to admit that, yeah, there was a vaccine already there for him. If that makes any difference.
Elections have consequences.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. I'm sorry, I have to go and get on a committee here. But I'm glad we had this amount of time. And we'll look forward to the future. I know that some of you had more questions. Don't hesitate to contact us. The best way is on our website, walberg.house.gov. There's an email link there that goes directly to us. That's the fastest way to contact our office. And we're glad to help and answer those questions. But remember, again, this is America. It's still the best place on the face of the earth with the greatest opportunity. We've been through tough things before. The Civil War, we came back. We've had recessions. We've had strange events that have gone on. We've had wars. We've been in but we've still come back if we don't give up. And so get out and vote. Get people that take it seriously to get out and vote. And if you want to involve yourself in being the oversight group at the ballot box, the polling places, the counting places, there are training sources that are out there right now to train people to do those jobs. The local Lenawee Republican Party can give you all the information on that. The state party can give you information on that. And then there's some independent entities as well that are doing training for ballot watchers, poll watchers, and counters. And if that's your concern, that's something you can do as well. Thank you.